How are you developers? I hope you are all fine. Today, we'll be diving into the CSS box model, a key concept in web development. And I'm certain you are all ready to learn how elements are being structured. So without much ado, let's dive in. The CSS box model is a fundamental concept in web development that defines the structure and layout of HTML elements on a web page. As you can see in the picture, that is the box model, and the box model consists of four main components. The first component is the content, the other component is the padding, the border, and the margin. These components together define the total space an element can occupy on a web page, and we'll see how that is in action. So let us open a VS Code and write some code. As you can see, here is my VS Code. I have two files here, the index.html file and the style.css file. All of them are blank, and you can see on my right I have this markdown previewer. I have some readme file that contains the notes that I'll use in this course. To access these notes, I'll put a link to the repo where you can find the notes of this course. So the link will be in the video description. So let us start by writing our HTML code. I'll just set the HTML boilerplate there, and I'll rename the title to CSS box model. Then I'll also link my CSS there, like that. So now my HTML is linked to my CSS, and inside here we can start writing our HTML code. So first let us learn about the box model before start writing the code. So while learning about the box model, you have to know one thing, that all elements are considered as boxes. So when you're doing CSS, you can consider all elements as boxes. And a box consists of a height, width, content, padding, border, all the stuff that we mentioned above. So let's start learning about one element at a time. So the first element is the content, and the content of the box is where the text and images appear. So for example, I have I'll just use the div, or let's just use a common element like the h1. So when talking about elements, you say that an element has an opening tag and a closing tag, and what you pass in between here is the content. So this CSS box model inside the h1 is the content of this element, and you can go to the browser and see it. If you go to the browser, you can see there's this content here, and I showed you how to inspect how to get the developer tools. And if you go here to computed, you can see this is the box model. If you right click, hit inspect, then you go to the computed part here in the developer tools, you can see this is the CSS box model. You can see it has the padding, border, margin, width, and height. So you can see by default our h1 has a width of 172 and a height of 116, and this width and height depends on the content that you put there. Or you can also define your width and height in the style. So look at how to do that. But as what I was showing you is that you can view the content of this box in your developer tools option, and you can see the padding is not set, the border is not set, and the margin is not set. But you can see the content is here. If I hover that, you can see it's hovered in the page, and that is how you view the developer options. So now let us look at the next thing, that is the height and the width. To talk about the height and the width, I'll just create an empty div here. I'll just create a div and give it a class of container. Then I'll go to the styles and style that container and give it a background color of blurry wood, and let me save. So we'll go to the browser and see if you can see the div. You see I put the background color to see if you can see the div in the browser. So if you go to the browser, here in the page you can see there's no visible div there. But if I go to my developer tools, I can see the div is here. Here's the div, and you can see, look at here closely below this model here. If I hover here, you can see there's some text written there. You can see div.container. So the div is there. the div has a class of container. It has a width of 156, but it has no height. You can see it when I hover here. When I click on it, you can see the div is here. It has a width of 156, but it has no height. So if an element has no height, it cannot be visible on the page. So for a div to be visible, we have to go and add some height property, and that is how the width and the height affect the box model. So if an element does not have a height, it will not be visible in the page. So for a div to be visible, you have to go and add some height in the div. So let's go back to VS Code and add some height. So back to VS Code, I'll add a height property here, and I'll say the height is, let's say, 100 pixels, like that. So if you put some height, you can go back to the browser and confirm that our div is now visible. So let's go to the browser and confirm that. So now if you go to the browser, you can see now our container is now visible, and it is visible because you added some height. You can see when I hover on it, you can see the width is 151 and the height is 100. All the values are in pixels. Also, you can see the box here. The width is 151 and the height is 100 pixels. So that is how you play with the width and the height of elements. So let us look at the next concept, that is padding. Before we talk about padding, let us talk about border, because border will help us understand padding. So border is just we'll say it's a line, or just like the word says, just a border that surrounds our element. So to add a border, first I'll create two divs. I'll just duplicate this div of mine to be 2, and I'll just change the classes from 1, and here I'll name it 2, and I'll give the content here. This will be our first container, this will be our second container, say 2, like that. And in the styles, I'll just remove this one because we no longer have it. So I'll say the class 1, like that. Then say this has a background color. Let's just use blue and red. So 1 will be blue, then 2 will be red. This container will be visible in the browser, although we did not provide the height and the width as we said before. But since you have the content, you can see in our index.html, the divs have some content. This is the content. Between the elements, there's this content. So as long as an element has a content, it will have height and width automatically, because the content will give the width and the height. So we don't have to specify the width and the height, and the element will be visible because of the content. So if there's no content, it's only you have to provide width and height. But if there's content, you no longer have to provide width and height. So I'll just add a border in both. Let me just remove the background color. Let me just put the border, because I think border is more visible. Border 2 pixels. So a border will be 2 pixels wide, will be a solid border, and it will be color blue, like that. And here our border will be 2 pixels also. Our border will be 2 pixels wide, and it will be a solid border, and it will be color red. That is how you add a border to your element. So let's just go to the browser and see how this border is. So if you go to the browser, you can see there's this first container here has a border of blue, and the other container has a border of red. And this border is what we're talking about. Border is what surrounds the element. So if I inspect this document here, and I click on any of the divs and go to the computed, you can see that the element now has a border of 2 pixels. You can see it's written 2 all around. So the border has 2 pixels. Also the second one is just similar. So to learn padding, I'll just in simpler language, padding is just space, but space inside the element. In short, space between the content and the border is what is called padding. Let us see it in action. Let me go back to VS Code and write some code. So padding, you have said padding is a space between the border and the content. So let me just add some padding in the first element. I'll just add some padding of 20 pixels. So let's go to the browser and see what that has effect in the container. So if you go to the browser, you can see now our first container has some space on top on both sides. you can see the space is added inside the element itself, or inside the between the content and the border is where the space is added, and this space that is called padding. And also if I inspect and hit my first container, see our computer, you can see now our box has some padding. You can see the green part is the padding. This part, when I hover on the computer, you can see this part turns green, and this part of the content will be white. You can see if I hover, let me just click on it. I hover, you can see the one is white in color, that is the content. This one is the content, but the other one, this one is the padding. So there's a padding of 20 pixels all around that element, and that is what we call padding. When I hover on this element, you can see now the height is 151 and the width is 62 pixels. So the height and the width is affected by the padding. So if I increase the padding, the height will increase. In short, the total height of the container is the height of the content plus the height of the padding plus the height of the border. That is how you get the total height of the element. And also the total width of the element is the width of the border, the width of the padding, and the width of the content. So you can see now our border, if I hover on it, where is it? Our element now has 151 pixels height and 62 pixels 151 pixels width and 62 pixels height. So the 151 width comes from the 107 width. You can see in the box the width of the content is just 107, then plus 20 pixels on both sides for the padding, so that will be 107 plus 40, it will be 147, then plus the 2 pixels on both sides for the border. That totals to 151, and that is how you calculate the width of the element. Also the height will be 2 pixels plus 20 plus 18 for the content and plus 20 for the padding and another 2 pixels for the border. So that will affect the height. So if you don't want the padding and the border to affect your width and height, you can just use this element is called box sizing, and you can set the value to be border box. This will make the height and width of your container to be the height and width that you specify. For example, if I specify my height to be, let's say my height to be 50 pixels and my width also to be 50 pixels, like that. Now even if I put some padding and some border, my height will still remain 50 pixels and my width will still remain 50 pixels, because I put this property here, border box, and I set it to box. I put the border box sizing property and I put the value to be border box. So let's see how this is in the browser. When I go to the browser, you can see even though I added the padding and the border with my element, this here is the element, will still remain 50 pixels by 50 pixels. You can see it here. When I hover on it, you can see it here, it's written 50 by 50. Because that is possible because I put the box sizing property and I set it to border box. So the height and the width that I define in the CSS will be the total height and total width of my container. So the width will not be affected by the padding and the border. That is how you can prevent your elements width and height should be affected by the padding and the border. So the element will fit itself and the padding will be included and the border will be included, but still the whole element will be the width and the height that you provided. That is how you use the border, the box sizing property. The next thing we're to talk about is the margin. So margin, you can see in the notes, where is it? Margin is also space, but the difference between margin and padding is that margin is space outside the border. We'll see that in action in a few minutes. So we said that padding is space inside between the content and the border, so it's inside the border. But now margin is the space outside the border, and margin does not affect the width and the height of the element because it's outside the border of that element. Margin is used to create space between two elements, and we'll see how that is possible. So in our first container here, in this one, I can add a margin. Just say margin 20 pixels, like that. And let us see how this affects the output. So if you go to the browser, you can see now our first container, there's some space between the two elements because we added some margin. Let me just show you. When I click the first container here, let me click on styles. so that I can turn. If I turn this margin off, you can see the container is, there's no space between the two elements. But if I turn the margin on in the developer tools, you can see now there is some space. So margin is used to create space outside the border or between two elements. So the difference between margin and padding is that padding creates space inside the element or between the element content, this content here, and this border. This blue line is the border. So space between this content and the border is the padding, and the padding affects the width and the height of that element. And we have seen how to resolve that problem in case you didn't want your padding to affect your width and height. You can use the box sizing property and set the value to border box. You have seen that already. And here you have seen that margin is the space between these two elements. This space is what we call margin. So if I go here to computed, you can see, let me click on this element, let me look at the computed style. There is that box. This box, you can see now our margin is 20 pixels. If I hover on this, you can see here in the element, around this element there'll be a brown border, a brown color, and that is the margin. That is the space that we created with the 20 pixels. So it pushes other elements to create some space, and that is how you use margin. Now I think now we know the difference between margin and padding. Now we know the difference between margin, padding, border, and content, and those are the four elements that are supposed to look at. But I'll emphasize on one thing. When I say padding of 20 pixels or margin of 20 pixels, I mean that value will be spread all around. If you look at the box here, you can see it has four parts: the top part, right, bottom, and left. So if I put margin or padding of 20 pixels, or even the border, if I put 20 pixels, I mean top 20 pixels, right 20 pixels, bottom 20 pixels, and left 20 pixels. But there's sometimes you want only to change the value of one place. For example, if you want to change the value of the padding top only, instead of writing padding, there's a property called padding top. So I'll put padding top 20 pixels. This will change the value of the padding on the top side only. The right, bottom, and left will have no padding. Only the top part will have padding. Also, there's the padding bottom. No, that's padding top, padding right. Next is padding right, 20 pixels. So if I put padding top 20 pixels, padding right 20 pixels, the padding will be top and right. If I want to put the padding on both sides, I can just put padding top, padding right, then padding bottom, 20 pixels, then padding left, 20 pixels. So all these four properties, I put padding top, padding right, padding bottom, and padding left, all of them to be 20 pixels. This one is equivalent to just writing padding, just padding, then 20 pixels. These four values, this four is the same as writing just padding 20 pixels. We have seen that already. I've said when write padding 20 pixels, it will put padding the top side 20 pixels, and this is how to put the padding top side 20 pixels if you want only the top side. So if you lose these single values, this maybe say padding top, padding right, if you want to put padding only on one side, but if you want to put the same padding evenly on both sides, you'll just use this shorthand property of padding. You just say padding 20 pixels, and it will put 20 pixels all around. The same case with margin. There's margin top, margin right, margin bottom, margin left, and margin right. Also, there's another shorthand. All these paddings, you can put them in one padding shorthand property, and just say padding. For example, let us put this example so that it can work well. For example, I want the padding top to be 10 pixels. Then I want the padding bottom to be 25 pixels. Then I want the padding left to be 15 pixels. And then the padding right to be 20 pixels, like that. So if the values of the top, right, bottom, and left are not the same, you cannot use this because this will put 20 pixels on both sides. But in this case, you want to put different values on the top, right, bottom, and left, so you cannot use this property. But there's another shorthand property. You just write padding. Then the first value will be the top, the next value will be for the right, the other value will be for the bottom, then the other value will be for the left. So you can see this is just like the clockwise. You start from top, like the clock, you start from 12 o'clock, where is the top, then you go to
right, bottom, left, in that clockwise direction. That is how you will specify the padding. So the top is 10 pixels. So I'll just replace this placeholder with the exact value 10 pixels. This will be for the top. Then for the right, it will be 20 pixels. I'll just say 20 pixels. Then bottom will be 25 pixels. Then left will be 15 pixels. So you can see this is just one is a shorthand property. I've just written padding, then I specify different values. But these values will be this code, this one line of code, this one is similar to this 4 lines of code. So instead of writing 4 lines, I can just write 1 line and specify top, right, bottom, left. So the first value will be for the top value, the next will be for the right value, this will be for the bottom, and this will be for the left. And that is fixed. You can, if you swap the values, this first value it expects a top value for the top. So if you put here 30 pixels, that will be for the top. This expects the value for the right. This one expects the value for the bottom, and this one expects the value for the left. And I showed you the easiest way to master this thing is just study the clock. You start from the top and go in a clockwise direction. Top, right, bottom, left. That clockwise direction is how you specify your values. And the same way is how you can specify your margin. The same shorthand property. Margin also has the same margin top, margin bottom, margin, all the same. In short, how you specify the values of margin and padding is just the same. Margin also has a margin top value, margin right, margin bottom, margin left, and also the shorthand property is just the same. So I'll just show you for the padding, and the same way you show the shorthand for padding is the same way you show the shorthand for margin. And also there's another shorthand here. Let's say the value of the top and bottom are the same. Say top has 10 pixels, bottom has 10 pixels, then right has 20 pixels, and also left has 20 pixels. If it is this way, you can use this shorthand property for 4 values, and you can just change top to be 10, and the next one we said it's right to be 20, then bottom you can put it 10, then left you can put it 20. But also there's another shorter way of writing this. But this way only applies if the top and the bottom are the same and the right and the left are the same. If the two sides are similar, you can just write padding. Then you provide 2 values. The first value, I'll say 10 pixels. This will be the value for the top and the bottom. Then the next value 20 pixels will be for the left and the right. So if you provide 2 values, it will be the first value will be for the top and bottom. The next value will be for the left and right. But if you provide 4 values, it will be for each individual side. And if you provide 1 value, it will be for all the 4 sides. So that's the shorthand property of padding. And the same shorthand property, you can use it for margin. I think that is clear. But there's a gotcha here. Margin, you can use negative values. When dealing with margin, you can put negative 20 here. So that will make the other element to move closer to that element by 20 pixels. But in padding, you cannot put negative values. And also there's another property called inherit. I think it's in the notes, inherit. There's this value called inherit. So if I put margin, I put the value of margin to be inherit. This means that the margin will inherit the margin of the parent. So if this container has a parent element, and say the parent element has 20 pixels margin, also this child element will have a 20 pixels margin. So inherit means take the value of my parent. I'll inherit that margin of my parent. Also padding can also take inherit. So padding can also put inherit. So inherit can be used for both padding and margin. And the other thing is about the margin can also take auto values. You can just say margin auto. And this margin auto, let's say margin auto. This margin auto will put even space on the left and the right. So let us save this margin auto and see how this style will conflict. So let me just comment. Let me comment this one, and let me comment this one also. For me not have to have some conflicts in my styles, I'll just leave only 1 value for padding and 1 value for. You're looking for the margin auto, how the margin auto behaves. So let me save my code and let us see how the margin auto behaves. You can see here in the browser this blue icon. Let me just close this tab so you can see it clearly. You can see this this container is placed center. The space on this side of the right and the space on this side of the left is even. And for you to place your element at the center with even space on the right and the left, you can use the auto property. So if you put margin auto, it will place even spaces on the left of the element, and the right of the element will be even. So this is one way to center a div. So to center a div, you can use margin 0 auto. You said if you put two values, the first value is for the top and bottom, the next value is the left and right. So if you put margin 0 means top value 0, bottom value 0. Then auto means left value auto, right value auto. So one way to center a div is to put margin 0 auto. But we'll learn about other more efficient methods as we proceed. But now you can just see how we center this div by using the auto property. And that is it for today's class. We'll meet tomorrow. But I am certain that you know the difference between padding and margin. That was the main content to be taught in this class. And now you have a good understanding about the CSS box model. So, see you in the next class, guys. Peace out.